This is Jarrod Horak, and in this video I'm going to analyze the Grade 1 Travers Stakes at Saratoga Race Course, Saturday, August 26th for today's RacingDigest.com. This is my weekly Digest Saratoga video. And speaking of the Digest, if you go over to today's RacingDigest.com, you'll find all of my handicapping articles from Saratoga that I've been writing all summer long. Stakes recaps, stakes previews, and much more. Also some stuff from Del Mar and some other tracks as well. So head on over to today's RacingDigest.com to read all of those handicapping articles. And in the description in this video, I'll provide a link to those articles. And now we're just going to dive right into the analysis of the Travers. But before I do, the past performances in this video are provided by today's RacingDigest.com. And the Travers Stakes is going to be the 12th race at Saratoga Race Course. And that'll be for Saturday, August 26, 2023. Grade 1, $1.25 million Travers Stakes for 3-year-olds traveling 1.25 miles on the main track. And the scheduled post time is 6:11 p.m. Eastern Time. There is a chance of rain, so there is a possibility that the Travers could be run on a wet track. Now, it's Wednesday, August 23rd right now, so there is a few days until the Travers Stakes, but rain is in the forecast at this point. Now, before I dive into the horses in this race, let's just go back and look at all the Grade 1 races run on dirt for the 3-year-old males. And this division's been wide open because each of the Grade 1 races have been won by a different horse. Beginning with the Florida Derby, your Travers favorite Forte won that one. And since that race, he's won for 2. He was second in the Belmont, and then he won the Jim Dandy, adding blinkers last time out on a wet track at Saratoga. Arcangelo Derby was next, and Angel of Empire won that race. So he captured that Grade 1 prep race for the Kentucky Derby, but then he lost his next 3 starts. In the Bluegrass Stakes, it was Tapit Trice for trainer Todd Pletcher. He is in the Travers Stakes, but since that Bluegrass Stakes, that was his peak effort this year, he's lost all 3 of his starts. The Santa Anita Derby went to practical move on the West Coast, and he was one of the contenders for the Kentucky Derby. But Kentucky Derby week, he got sick. He had to scratch out of that race. He hasn't run since, but he has returned to the work tab recently, and they're going to try to bring him back later this year. The Kentucky Derby went to Mage. That was a pace meltdown there. And since that Kentucky Derby, he's lost both of his starts. In the Preakness Stakes, there was no pace going on, and National Treasure stole that race on the front end, and then he came back in the Belmont, and he did not duplicate that feat after setting the pace in that race. In the Belmont Stakes, it was Arcangelo. He got the job done there, and he hasn't run since then, and he is running in the Travers Stakes, and he is your second choice on the morning line, making his first start in 11 weeks. The Grade 1 Woody Stevens at 7 furlongs on that Belmont undercard. Arabian Lion for trainer Bob Baffert won that race, and he has been able to handle 2 turns, but the Travers distance was going to be too much for him, and they're going to keep him sprinting, and they're going to run him in the H. Allen Jerkins Memorial on the Travers undercard. And then the Haskell Stakes was the last Grade 1 race in this division. Go Rocket Ride from the West Coast was able to get the job done there as much the best, tracking the pace on the outside under Mike Smith. So as you can see, all the races in this division in the Grade 1 ranks, different winner each time. And a lot of the horses, the only one that's actually come back and won their next start after running and winning a Grade 1 was Forte when he won that Jim Dandy. But he did finish second in the Belmont. And we'll start with Forte. He's your 7-5 morning line favorite. He's 7 for 9 lifetime with a runner-up finish. He has only finished out of the top 3 one time. That was in the Grade 3 Sanford, where he finished 4th at Saratoga last year. All of his races since then, very good. He's banked almost $3 million in his career. He's 2 for 3 at Saratoga, 2 for 2 on a wet track, 5 for 7 on a fast track. So it doesn't matter what the track condition is, he's going to show up. He won his career debut at Belmont last year. Then he was 4th in that Sanford Stakes, and then he got on a roll. Grade 1 hopeful in the slop at Saratoga. He rallied to win that one. 5th in a 6-horse field, and then he rallied. He won by 3, and he rallied from off the pace in the Breeders' Futurity. Grade 1 stretching out in distance for the first time at Keeneland. He won that race by a neck. His next start, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, had a good stalking trip. He won that one by a length and a half. And that after that, he was named the 2-year-old champion. He returned in his 3-year-old season in the Fountain of Youth Stakes at Gulfstream Park on March 4th at 1 mile and a 16th. He dominated that race. He sat in mid-pack. He took over. He won by more than 4. The Florida Derby, it looked like he was going to lose that one. Mage made the first closing run there. Mage closed from 12th to take the lead. It looked like he was home free. Forte made the last run and ran him down by a length. Forte was the Kentucky Derby favorite, but he had a foot bruise the week of the Kentucky Derby. They had to scratch out of that race, and I'm sure his connections were very bummed, especially the way that the Kentucky Derby played out this year, where we had a pace meltdown, and Mage ended up winning it, and Forte handled Mage in the Fountain of Youth and Florida Derby. And then Forte also was not able to compete in the Preakness Stakes because he went on the 14-day vet list after scratching from the Derby, and that made him ineligible to run in the Preakness. So then they were able to run him in the Belmont Stakes. His first start in 10 weeks, he had missed some training time coming off that foot bruise. He had missed a race, and he ran gallantly there. He was the favorite. He shouldn't have been the favorite. He had too much to overcome there, but he ran a quality race. It looked like he was spinning his wheels for a while, and then when they got him outside in the stretch, he showed some nice late energy, and he was just able to nip his stablemate Tapit Trice by a nose for the runner-up spot. Arcangelo was able to save all the ground and get the jump on the closers and win that day. And then they brought him back in the Jim Dandy and they put blinkers on. They wanted him to show more positional speed. Mission accomplished. That definitely worked there. He was only a length and a half back early, and he was always right within striking range. The only problem there was that Saudi Crown was controlling the pace, and he was backing up that pace. Forte was stuck on the inside tracking, and Angel of Empire was on the outside of Forte, and Flavien Prat aboard Angel of Empire. He kept Forte and Jarrod Ortiz Jr. hemmed in for much of the running. The stretch run was a bit adventurous. Forte was looking to go inside, but Saudi Crown didn't come off the rail. Then he wanted to come outside, but Angel of Empire was leaning all over him. So he created his own hole, and he was able to push his way through. As soon as he did that, Saudi Crown started drifting out. The stretch run was a little bit of a mess, but Forte was able to get the job done by a nose, and he was clearly best that day. If you watch that stretch run, forget about the disqualification or non-disqualification, anything like that. That doesn't really matter when you're talking about handicapping the race. Clearly, just looking at that race objectively, Forte was clearly the best horse. He would have won by more lengths under a little bit of a more comfortable trip. And now he's got to watch out that the same thing doesn't happen in here, because in this race, much like the Jim Dandy, there doesn't seem to be a lot of pace, and Forte's got better tactical position now, and you got to figure he's going to be up there, and he has to be careful not to get hemmed in again. I think Jarrod Ortiz Jr. is not going to allow that to happen this time, and most likely he's going to work out some kind of clean trip, and he is definitely the horse to beat as the morning line favorite. Number 2, Arcangelo. This one making his first start in 11 weeks since winning that Belmont Stakes. But let's back up and look at all his career starts. He started his career 6 furlongs in the slop at Gulfstream, December 17th of 2022, and he rallied from last to finish second that day. They got him out into a one-turn mile, and he ended up 4th, and then he turned everything around after that. His next start in a one-turn mile at Gulfstream Park, he was able to break his maiden going last to first. And then the Peter Pan Stakes, that was his big coming out party. He had Lasix in his second and third start, but he didn't have it in his debut, and he didn't have it in his stakes debut in the Grade 3 Peter Pan. And in an 8-horse field, he was able to rally from 6th and get in a prolonged battle with Bishop's Bay, and he was just able to outfinish that one by a head, and it was more than 8 lengths back to the show finisher. So the top 2 ran quality races in that Peter Pan, and then in the Belmont Stakes, he just absolutely worked out a dream trip under Javier Castellano. He saved all the ground in there, right behind the speed, within hailing distance throughout. The inside opened up in the stretch. He was able to get clear by 3.5 lengths, and then he was getting tired late, and he won by 1.5 lengths. The trip certainly worked out for him that day. Now, Javier Castellano will stay aboard. He had his option to ride Kentucky Derby winner Mage in this race or Belmont Stakes winner Arcangelo. He decided to stick with Arcangelo. Now, he's training well in here. I guess the only question is going to be, after 11 weeks off, is he going to be fighting ready? If he gets into a stretch battle, is he going to be as fit as horses like Forte, just coming off that good battle in that Jim Dandy? And I can definitely see Forte gaining something from that and his second start in blinkers, whereas Arcangelo hasn't run in 11 weeks. We'll see how that layoff impacts him. He's one that he's run well fresh before. That's not a huge concern. The biggest concern, as I said, is how much of a fighting spirit is he going to have? Is he going to be able to shake off that rust and beat some horses that have been showing some more recency than he has? Number 3, Tapit Trice. He's 12-1 morning line, and he's adding blinkers for trainer Todd Pletcher. They're trying to shake it up. He's one that he's run fast enough to win this race, just he's just so inconsistent. You're just not quite sure what you're going to get from him. He's one that I've always liked, and he was really doing well from his career debut in November all the way up to the Bluegrass Stakes. He continually improved his speed ratings. After finishing third in his debut in a one-turn mile, he broke his maiden second time out in a one-turn mile. Then he won another one-turn mile at Gulfstream. That was in February. Grade 3 Tampa Bay Derby. He had a slow start. It didn't look like he had any chance in that race, and then he closed like a rocket in the stretch to win by 2 lengths. He was 1-2. He was much better than his competition that day. The Bluegrass Stakes was his next start, probably his best career effort. That day he broke from the inside post, and he was able to, his rider Luis Saez was able to move him outside, and he made an early move because there wasn't a lot of pace going on, and Verifying was controlling that pace. And Tapit Trice moved early, came after Verifying. He had just more stamina than that one. He was able to win by a neck, and it was more than 5 lanes back to the Preakness runner-up Blazing Sevens that day. And then in the Kentucky Derby, he just did not run his best race. I liked him that day. The pace set up for him. Everything seemed to be falling into place. He just didn't kick it in. A flat effort. He rallied from 18th and last to finish 7th. And then in the Belmont Stakes, I made him my top choice in the Belmont. I just thought a son of Tapit, 5 weeks from the Derby all the way to the Belmont. Horses that ran in the Derby, skipped the Preakness, and then ran the Belmont. They did well over the years, especially for trainer Todd Pletcher. He has a much better record in the Belmont than he does in the Derby. So horses pointing to the Belmont after finishing unplaced in the Derby for his barn typically improved. And Tapit Trice did improve. He ran third. He was only beaten a length and a half. He was only a nose out of the runner-up spot. So he ran a quality race that day, but he was wide. Forte was wide. Arcangelo was saving the ground, and he earned a quality speed rating. And then the Haskell Stakes, he just didn't show up last time out. That Monmouth Park track really wouldn't favor him. I just think this 1.25 mile distance, it's much better. We'll see what we get with blinkers on. He's one that's always trained well in the mornings, but he just hasn't always backed that up in the afternoons. And if you're going by the sheets numbers, the number he earned in the Bluegrass and the Belmont Stakes, more than competitive to make him a contender in here at 12-1, but you just don't know what you're going to get with him. Now he's got a new rider as well. Jose Ortiz is going to ride him in this spot because his regular rider, Luis Saez, opted to ride a number 4 Mage in here. And he is 4-1 on the morning line. And he's run 6 times, 2 wins, 2 seconds, and a 3rd place finish. His career debut, he started in January of this year, and he wired the field at 7 furlongs, controlled pace, not a lot of pace there. Hasn't really been a pace factor in any of his other races. He did stalk the pace in the Fountain of Youth from an outside stalking type trip. And he ended up finishing 4th, beaten 6 lanes. But he needed that race. Good stakes experience in his second career start. First start around 2 turns. Ran much better in the Florida Derby, rallying from 12th and last after a slow start, taking the lead, and then finishing a clear second behind Forte. Then the Kentucky Derby, the pace meltdown. He was the best closer that day. We've seen that over the years. You get a pace meltdown in the Kentucky Derby, and then one of the closers just jumps up and runs a career best race. And then they typically have a hard time duplicating that when they get different race shapes in their next starts. And that's exactly what happened with Mage. He was able to rally from 16th place and 13 lengths back to win the Kentucky Derby by a length over 2 fills. 2 fills ran the best overall race that day. He was up on the pace, but Mage was the best closer, and he won at 15-1. And then in the Preakness, he was overbet. The pace, there was no pace. He went from a race with an electric pace to no pace in the Preakness, and he finished an even 3rd. Really had no shot that day. Had no business being bet down that low either. Then in the Haskell Stakes, his connection said the Haskell was just a prep for this race. They were going to use that race as a springboard to the Travers, and it was mission accomplished there. He rallied from 6th. He made a run at Go Rocket Ride in the stretch. Couldn't go with that one, but he finished a clear second. And Arabian Night, coming off of a layoff, set the pace there, and he ended up finishing a clear 3rd. So that was a good effort, and now he could run another good race here. But if you look at his overall stakes record, he's just 1 for 5 in the stakes ranks. And he got a pace meltdown on the day that he won his stakes race. And that's not going to happen most likely in this spot. Number 5 in here, National Treasure for trainer Bob Baffert. And he's removing blinkers. And he's one he's been all over the place. He wore blinkers in his career debut when he wired the field that day. They took him off second time out in the American Pharoah, and he chased him with second best. They put him back on in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He finished 3rd there. They took him off in the Sham Stakes. He was 3rd, beaten the length. And then in the Santa Anita Derby, he finished an even 4th. And then in the Preakness Stakes, he was able to steal that one. And then the Belmont, he set the pace again at 1.5 miles. And that day, he ended up weakening in the stretch and finishing 6th in that 9-horse field. Now, if you look at the times he set the pace, his career debut, 6.5 furlongs, he went out and set the pace. When they added blinkers in the Preakness, he set the pace. And then in the Belmont Stakes, he set the pace. So the three of the times that he wore blinkers, he set the pace. Each time that he didn't have blinkers, he didn't set the pace in any of those races, and he doesn't have blinkers here. Now, he did have a foot issue earlier this year. He was supposed to run in the San Felipe Stakes. They had to miss that race. So the Santa Anita Derby was a race he needed, and he raced evenly, and he looked short that day. And then he did move forward in the Preakness, but then the Belmont was too far for him. And now in this race, we're going to see what we get from him. He's going to have to run faster. The Preakness wasn't a strong race this year. Only one horse from the Derby, Mage, showed up. It was a 7-horse field and no pace, and he just controlled it. And he's got to prove that he can run a different kind of race here. Although I will say, with his rider, John Velasquez, not a lot of pace. He should be forwardly placed in this spot, but he's going to have to run his career best race. Disarm is next, and he's another one adding blinkers, and I think that's a good move for this Steve Asmussen trainee. This son of Gun Runner has run 8 times, 2 wins, 2 seconds, and 2/3. He's 1 for 2 at Saratoga. And on a fast track, he's got 6 starts, 1 win, 2 seconds, and 2/3. And he's won on a wet track before. He won the Grade 3 Matt Win Stakes on a wet track earlier this year. Now, he's won. It took him a while to get going, but he was second in the Louisiana Derby, and he rallied for second. Kings Barnes controlled the pace, no speed whatsoever. And it was nice to see a horse like Disarm close and make up some ground in a race with no pace. The Lexington Stakes, they had to run him one more time because he didn't have enough Kentucky Derby points to get in. And in the Lexington, he needed to finish in the top 3. First Mission and Arabian Lion were 1-2, and Disarm did just enough there, finishing 3rd to qualify for the Kentucky Derby. In the Kentucky Derby, he ran a good race. He was sitting back, saving some ground, and he was able to pass some horses and rally from 13th place to end up finishing 4th. Solid effort there. But they did have to rush him to get to the Derby. They were running him in the Louisiana Derby, in the Lexington, and the Kentucky Derby. A lot of races without a lot of space between those races. Then the Matt Win, he had much better race spacing between the Kentucky Derby and the Matt Win. And then in his Jim Dandy Stakes last time, that race did not set up for closers. You saw Saudi Crown and Forte and Angel of Empire. They were up on the pace, and they did not come back. And Disarm was last for much of the running, and he was able to pass Hit Show, and he was able to finish 4th there. So now they're going to put blinkers on, because what they would like him to do is run exactly like he did in the Matt Win when he was stalking 3rd, a length and a half back of the early pace, and he was able to grind out that win over verifying. So that's the kind of trip they want in here. They want him to stalk the pace, and maybe the blinkers will get him to focus a bit more early. I liked him in the Jim Dandy last time because I thought he could sit a tactical trip. That didn't happen. Maybe with the blinkers he can do that in this spot. Finally, number 7, Scotland. For trainer Bill Mott, the son of Good Magic. He's 3 for 4 with a runner-up finish. His speed ratings continued to improve, including a nice win in the Curlin Stakes when he stretched out last time. His first 2 starts at 7 furlongs. He went last to first in his career debut at Gulfstream Park in March. He stuck the pace, only a length and a half back in his second career start, and he missed by a nose. 1 turn mile at Churchill in his 3rd start. He rallied from 7th place in a 10-horse field to get up by a head. And then in the Curlin Stakes, not a lot of pace going on there. And Scotland was able to get out there and battle on the pace. Il Miracolo was up there with them. And those two dominated, with Scotland pulling clear to win by more than 3. And Il Miracolo coming back to win the Grade 3 Smarty Jones Stakes earlier this week at Parks. And then Blazing Sevens was a disappointing 3rd in that Curlin. So now Bill Mott hasn't won the Travers. This is a race that he wants to win. And this horse does have a bullet workout on the Saratoga training track on August 20th. So he's one that's lightly raced. He has a lot of upside. He's the only horse that's not a graded stakes winner in this field. But he's one that has a lot of upside. That was a good effort in the Curlin over that Saratoga track. And he should be forwardly placed. So looking at the pace in here, you would think that Scotland should be forwardly placed along with National Treasure. And then you're going to see Forte most likely tucking in a nice tactical position. You would expect Arcangelo to be mid-pack, Tapit, Trice, and Mage towards the back. So that's kind of how it's going to play out. And then Disarm with those blinkers, maybe he can try to work out some sort of mid-pack trip. So the way that this race is shaping up pace-wise, looking like a slower early, fast late type event. And for my top choice in the Travers, I'm going to go with Forte. I just think he certainly is the horse to beat in here. He's got his campaign back on track again after that foot bruise. So he's got that good race spacing going again. They've been pointing to the Travers. The Travers is like his Kentucky Derby. They really want to prove that he is the best 3-year-old in the country. And from a trip standpoint, I can see him sitting a good tactical trip in third. Out of the horses that are going to be up on the pace with National Treasure and Scotland and Forte, I think he's the classiest of those three. He gets the jump on the closers, and he's able to win the Travers Stakes. Now, if you're interested in checking out my Travers article that will accompany this video, and go over to todaysracingdigest.com, I'm going to go through and go through this Travers and break it down a bit more and give out some wagering strategies as well. So go over to Today's Racing Digest for that. And until I see you next time, good luck at the races.